We are a species that can measure the spin of electrons, simulate the birth of galaxies, and map neural activity with microscopic precision yet, somehow. Amid all this breathtaking mastery of the physical world, we continue to ask the most ancient of questions. Who am I? Why am I here? It is a paradox of our era. We manipulate atoms and create artificial intelligence, but struggle to navigate the architecture of our own awareness. We fly spacecraft beyond the heliopause, yet remain grounded in confusion when it comes to the contours of consciousness. But perhaps the issue is not a lack of intelligence, but a lack of integration. Because understanding the universe out there without understanding the mind in here is like studying the laws of music without ever listening to a song. Just as matter bends around mass and time stretches near gravity, our perceptions bend around belief, and time feels different depending on the rhythm of thought. Physics does not end at the edge of a telescope. It lives in your breath, your heartbeat, your synaptic pathways. The idea of a fifth dimension, often dismissed as fantasy, need not be relegated to mysticism. In theoretical physics, dimensions are additional degrees of freedom, ways in which a system can vary. We move in three spatial directions, we experience time as a fourth, and in some models, additional dimensions account for the strange behavior of subatomic particles or the potential unification of gravity with the quantum world. But if we allow ourselves to explore metaphor through the lens of science, we might say that the so-called fifth dimension is not a realm elsewhere, but a higher order configuration of consciousness, one in which the observer becomes entangled with the observed in more intricate ways. And this, ironically, brings us back to physics. The observer effect in quantum mechanics tells us that the mere act of observation alters the outcome of an event. The particle does not have a fixed identity until we interact with it. And if this holds true at the smallest scales of matter, it begs the question, to what extent is reality shaped by the lens through which we observe it? Consciousness, though difficult to define, is not immune to analysis. We know the brain filters information based on past experiences, emotional states, and neurological biases. In this sense, what we perceive is not reality itself, but a reconstruction tailored by the brain for survival rather than truth. So when someone speaks of shifting frequency or ascending in vibration, let's not get lost in metaphysical poetry. Let's talk physiology. Let's talk neuroscience. Your thoughts produce electrical activity measurable by EEG. Your heart emits an electromagnetic field that interacts with the world around you. Your emotional state alters hormonal output, muscle tension, and even immune function. These are not speculative claims, they are empirical findings. So yes, your state of being influences your perception of reality, not because you are a magician, but because you are a participant in a dynamic, feedback-driven system. The question, then, is not whether reality changes, it's how your participation tunes your interface with it. What people often call higher dimensions may, in scientific terms, be closer to shifts in cognitive bandwidth moments where pattern recognition expands, where time feels less linear, and where self-awareness deepens. These states are not esoteric, they are accessible. Practices like mindfulness, gratitude, and focused attention activate neural pathways that enhance emotional regulation and cognitive flexibility. This isn't mysticism, it's measurable. And in this light, elevating your frequency might be reframed as achieving greater coherence internally between thought and emotion, and externally between action and environment. Coherence, after all, is a physical concept. In wave mechanics, coherent waves amplify one another. In biology, coherent heart rhythms are associated with well-being. In society, coherent systems adapt and flourish, while incoherent ones fragment and fail. So the real challenge is not how to escape to some imagined fifth dimension, but how to inhabit this one more fully, with clarity, with integrity, with attention. Because the universe does not ask for your belief, it simply responds to your engagement. Just as Earth tilts with precision to create the equinox, you too can shift with intention to recalibrate your inner state. This is not magic. It is alignment, not with some ethereal blueprint, but with the principles that govern life at every scale. resonance, rhythm, relationship. If the cosmos is a grand equation, then consciousness is the variable still unfolding, and your awareness is the coefficient that multiplies potential into form. And when you realize this, when you understand that you are not just a product of the universe, but a lens through which it observes itself, you stop seeking escape and start seeking precision. The great misunderstanding of our time is the belief that transformation requires external upheaval, a cosmic event, a planetary realignment, or a sudden revelation. But the truth is far more subtle and far more profound. Change at the level of consciousness begins not with spectacle, but with perception. The brain, through a process known as neuroplasticity, rewires itself based on repeated patterns of thought and behavior. It is not the event that defines your reality, it is the lens you apply to it. And this lens is malleable. It is influenced by what you attend to, what you believe, what you allow yourself to feel. In physics, systems tend toward equilibrium. In biology, organisms adapt to maintain homeostasis. In psychology, the mind seeks coherence. When all three align, when your perception becomes congruent with your biology and the natural order, you enter a state not of transcendence, but of resonance. The universe, after all, is not a static backdrop. It is a dynamic field vibrating with structure, probability, and emergence. And in this field, every thought, every emotion, every action sends out a signal. That signal, like a waveform, interferes constructively or destructively with the signals around it. This is not poetic metaphor. This is wave interference. And it means that the quality of your presence influences the quality of your experience. So when we speak of raising our frequency, we are not invoking mysticism. We are describing a shift in the harmonic pattern of thought and physiology. The heart's rhythms can synchronize with breath. The brain's waves can shift from beta to alpha, from stress to presence. These changes are observable, they are teachable, and they are repeatable, which makes them scientific. Not because they fit neatly into existing models, but because they produce consistent, measurable effects. When you choose awareness over reaction, when you practice gratitude in the face of uncertainty, when you respond to conflict, not with blame, but with curiosity, you are not simply being spiritual, you are changing the information flow within your nervous system. You are broadening your perceptual aperture. You are reshaping the neural architecture of your mind. And that matters. Because how you perceive the world determines what you believe is possible, and what you believe is possible determines how you act. And how you act repeatedly, consistent, determines what becomes real. This is not metaphysics, it is systems theory. In a feedback loop, small changes in input produce large changes in output if repeated over time. The butterfly effect, long romanticized in chaos theory, is not just a whimsical notion, it is a mathematical reality of complex systems. And your thoughts, your intentions, your emotional base linear part of such a system, you are not merely a subject in the universe. You are a signal generator within it. The question is, what signal are you transmitting? Because coherence attracts coherence. Disruption multiplies disruption. In the language of electromagnetism, like fields resonate, and in human experience, like states amplify. So the work of shifting into what some call a higher dimension is not about leaping into a parallel universe. It is about refining your alignment with the one you're already in. The so-called fifth dimension is not elsewhere. It is here embedded in your capacity to perceive complexity without fragmentation, to hold paradox without retreat, to choose meaning over noise. This is not transcendence, it is participation. And participation is what the cosmos seems to reward, not passivity, not escapism, but engagement with reality at its most intricate levels. That is where insight lives. That is where intelligence multiplies. That is where awareness becomes evolution. There is a growing misconception that awareness is passive, that to observe with presence is to somehow remove oneself from action, but observation is participation. In quantum mechanics, the observer does not stand outside the experiment. They are woven into its very outcome. The act of measurement collapses probability into actuality. And this collapse is not a metaphor, it is a measurable phenomenon. So too in your life, where you place your attention determines which version of the world becomes real to you. This is not to say that external reality bends to your will, but that your interface with that reality, your interpretive frame, is what gives it shape, meaning, and trajectory. In a very real way, attention is creative force. It decides which data is enhanced and which is ignored. It filters reality like a lens filters light. And the remarkable truth is that this lens can be trained. This is where science converges with wisdom. Practices like meditation, breath regulation, and cognitive reframing are not merely cultural artifacts or wellness trends, they are tools of cognitive recalibration. Neuroscience shows that sustained attention reshapes the brain's functional connectivity. Heart rate variability reflects emotional flexibility and resilience. The vagus nerve, connecting the brain to the body's internal systems, responds to calm with coherence and to fear with fragmentation. You are not a collection of isolated systems, you're an ecosystem. A living, breathing, sensing interface between matter and meaning. And that interface is fluid. It changes based on habit, intention, and environment. So when you hear someone say, shift your frequency, the more grounded translation is this: shift the baseline patterns of thought and biology through which you engage with the world, not with hope. With habit, not through ritual, through regulation. The laws of physics haven't changed, but your access to their beauty depends on your clarity. This is where we begin to see the deeper value of stillness, not as idleness, but as synchronization. The Earth does not stop to generate equilibrium. It leans with elegance. The equinox is not a pause in motion, it is a symmetry of forces. Likewise, balance in your life is not the absence of difficulty, but the presence of rhythm. Rhythms that align thought with breath, breath with intention, intention with behavior. This isn't esoteric, this is harmonic resonance. Coherence, both internally and externally, is what allows a system to amplify its signal without distortion. And that's precisely what your nervous system, your relationships, your cognition all depend on. You don't need to escape chaos. You need to become a signal of coherence within it. And here is where consciousness meets cosmology. Just as stars are born from the gravitational collapse of gas and dust, moments of inner transformation often arise from the collapse of familiar identities. Pressure, disruption, uncertainty, these are not signs of failure. They are the physics of formation. The brain, under challenge, seeks new connections. The self, under reflection, reorganizes. And the beauty of being human is that you can witness this process in real time. You can feel the shift. You can track it with data. You can express it in words. No other known species on Earth possesses this level of self-referential awareness. It is not arrogance to acknowledge this, it is responsibility. Because with awareness comes influence. And influence, like mass in space, curves everything around it. If gravity sculpts galaxies, your behavior repeated, refined, and radiated sculpts the immediate space of human experience. You are not isolated. You are not incidental. Just as each atom in your body is held together by fundamental forces, so too is society held together by forces less visible, but no less real. Empathy, integrity, shared understanding. These are not abstract values, they are behavioral signals. And just as atoms organize into molecules through stable bonds, people organize into systems through resonance. Neuroscience has shown us that the human brain is a social organ. Mirror neurons fire when we observe another's behavior. Emotional states synchronize in groups. Stress is contagious, but so is calm. You are not just broadcasting your own frequency, you are modulating the frequencies of those around you. And the collective nervous system, what some call the noosphere, is not fantasy, is a network of influence, feedback, and adaptation. The more coherent the individuals, the more resilient the system. This is not spiritual optimism, it is systems biology. So imagine, if you will, a planet not just spinning through space, but pulsing with fields of human thought, emotion, and intention. A field shaped not by declarations, but by demonstrations. Not by proclamations, but by patterns. If enough people begin to self-regulate their inner world, not perfectly, but consistently, the external world begins to show signs of realignment. Not because matter has been mystically altered, but because the interpreters of that matter, the minds engaging with it, are now operating with more clarity. This is what the physics of complex systems teaches us, that phase transitions don't require unanimity-only critical mass. That change emerges not from control, but from coherence. And this coherence begins not in institutions, but in individuals. You do not need credentials to participate in this shift. You need awareness. You do not need certainty. You need attention. Because the fifth dimension, stripped of its mystical robes, is simply the perspective that allows you to hold opposites without collapso, feel pain without becoming it, to witness confusion without losing clarity, to act without attachment. And this perspective is not far away. It is one breath removed from reactivity. It is one decision away from your current baseline. And every time you return to that decision through practice, through humility, through repetition, you increase your probability of coherence. Not because you have ascended, but because you've aligned. There is no magic in this process. Only elegance. The elegance of biofeedback, the elegance of neuroadaptation, the elegance of consciousness shaping itself through its own attention. You don't rise above the world, you descend into it more fully, with less distortion, with more precision, like tuning a telescope not to escape Earth, but to see it more clearly, like calibrating a lens not to invent new stars, but to resolve the light that was always there. That's what awareness does. It doesn't fabricate beauty, it reveals it. And so we return to the same question with which we began, not to answer it conclusively, but to hear it more clearly. Who are you and why are you here? You are not a mistake. You are not a background extra in a predetermined script. You are a configuration of stardust, animated by biology, sculpted by evolution, and capable uniquely of asking questions about the very forces that created you. That alone is miraculous. The hydrogen in your body was born in the Big Bang. The calcium in your bones came from dying stars. The iron in your blood was forged in the core of supernovae. You do not simply live in the cosmos. You are a record of its history, a mirror of its laws, a moment in its unfolding story. And your awareness is not an afterthought of matter eats, is the frontier through which the universe learns to observe itself. So the so-called fifth dimension is not elsewhere. It is not a portal. It is not a fantasy. It is the realization that this moment, this ordinary, fleeting, precious, momentous, saturated with potential, and that your presence in it, when directed with attention, alignment, and intention, is the very mechanism by which reality is refined. This isn't spiritual escapism, it's thermodynamic truth. It's the application of physics to perception. It's the integration of neuroscience with humility. And it leads to this, that evolution is not over, that consciousness is still unfolding, and that you are not behind it, you are inside it, shaping it, participating in it with every breath, every thought, every choice you make. You don't need to wait for the future to bring a better world. You don't need to ascend to some imagined frequency to be worthy of awe. You already are what the universe does when it builds something that can wonder. And wonder, perhaps, is the real threshold between dimensions, not because it's sentimental, but because it suspends certainty long enough for learning to occur. That is science. That is consciousness. That is you. So the next time you look up at the night sky, let it not be a reminder of what is distant, but of what is shared. Those stars are not far from you. They are your ancestors. The space between them is not empty. It is structure, pattern, law. The same law that governs your neurons, your breath, your heartbeat. You are not an outsider to this vastness. You are evidence of its precision. You are the part of the universe that knows it's alive. So live not in separation, but in synchrony. Not in fantasy, but in focus. Not to escape, but to participate. Because in the end, the fastest way to reach the fifth dimension is to realize you were never separate from it. You were the signal all along.